wanted to introduce today Adam Marton. He, as is the case with everyone that we'll be hearing from today, he is with the University of Maryland Philip Merrill College of Journalism. He joined them there in 2018. Before that, he worked for 13 years at the Baltimore Sun as the senior data and graphics editor, including on the Pulitzer finalist piece about Freddie Gray's death, for those of you who were in the area at the time. That was just some really stunning work, stunning case. He is a visual journalist, and at UMD, he also oversees the student-run Capital News Service. And today, he is going to be walking us through Datawrapper, and thank you to those who answered our informal poll. He, I think, is going to have a little something for everyone today. So thank you very much, Adam, for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Anne. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for that nice introduction, Anne. So today, right, so as Anne said, today I'm going to teach you guys how to use an online program called Datawrapper to create sort of simple charts and graphs and maps and data visualizations. So Datawrapper is an online tool, free. You know, everybody can sign up for an account today, and we'll go through a couple exercises here and do what we can in an hour. And so I understand that some of you guys have used Datawrapper before, some of you guys are pretty good at it. So feel free to shout out questions as we go along. You know, or if you have suggestions or things I'm not thinking of, and I'll show a couple more advanced things too. So hopefully we'll get a little something in for everybody. So you know, the point, you know, how the way journalists really use Datawrapper is to sort of add context and visual interest and interactivity to graphics for their news stories. As everybody knows, right, making data visualizations and graphics is a really great way to sort of draw in readers and help tell your stories in a new and interesting way. You know, it's interesting, Datawrapper has really changed the math in a lot of newsrooms, where I remember when I taught this, a session similar to this, when I first started at Merrill like 3 or 4 years ago, to you know, to a similar group of people. At the end, I taught a program called Infogram, and at the end they asked, "Oh, well, is this how you make graphics in the newsroom?" I said, "Oh no, well, absolutely not. You know, for that I use Adobe Illustrator and JavaScript, and I could never teach you in an hour how to make graphics." But you know, Datawrapper and another program called Flourish that's been bought by Google have really changed that calculation. For the first time, you can really make these high quality, professional looking graphics and data visualizations with this sort of off the shelf tool. You can customize them for your publication, and they're print ready. And what we've seen is a lot of newsrooms adapting this technology. And what it does, you know, when I was at the Sun, like half my job, maybe more than half, was making like bar charts and locator maps. And that's like, you know, that's sort of a waste of time for, you know, that's not the best use of skills for your graphics team. So Datawrapper really makes it so that anybody can do locator maps and bar charts and line charts, and you can use your data visualization people for sort of more bespoke, complicated graphics. You see places like the LA Times have adapted Datawrapper to the point where they're actually making like their print graphics in Datawrapper, and it's just a whole new sort of workflow for a lot of organizations. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in and start making some graphics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demo of how to make like a bar chart and a line chart. Then I'm going to pass it to you guys and have you work on an exercise, and then we'll do a couple maps, and then I'll pass it to you and let you do a map, and that will definitely take up an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and share, and we'll get started. Okay, so can everybody see my screen? It has the Datawrapper thing there. Give me a nod. Okay, awesome. I've got 2 screens going, so I can sort of see you, but just shout if you have questions. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but I'm looking at a couple screens to work the data and everything else. So if you see me looking away, that's what I'm doing. I will mention, you know, I've got this data that we're going to work from today. Most of the data that we're looking at is about a year old. It's all COVID numbers, and it hopefully no one can blame me for not going through the depressing task of updating COVID numbers every time I do a workshop. But so don't take these numbers and publish them. They're just for our purposes today. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just make a really simple bar chart. I've got some data here that looks at, let's see what we got. So this looks at state COVID numbers. And so I've got, I pulled this from the, let's see, where did I pull it from? From the New York Times GitHub repo of COVID numbers. There's two major sources for COVID numbers. One is the New York Times and the other is Johns Hopkins, CSSE, and both of them pull from like various local health departments and such. So I pulled cases and deaths, but what we get, now, this isn't going to get too heavy into data, but it's worth mentioning, cases and deaths are like a really poor metric for how bad things are. What we really need to do whenever we have numbers like that is normalize them. So look at what I did in this case was I pulled population estimates for each state, and then just did some really simple math, right? We have part divided by whole times 1,000 gives us cases per 1,000 people and deaths per 1,000 people. And that's like a much better metric, right? In a lot of cases, when you just look at like raw numbers, what you're gonna see is the biggest states always come out on top, like for everything, right? The most people die in California and Texas, the most people are arrested in California and Texas, because they're the biggest states, right? But once we normalize numbers, we see things a lot different. So from this data, I sort of truncated a little bit and just pulled out exactly what I wanted. I want to do a bar chart that shows the top 10 states in the US with cases per 1,000 people, right? And again, this is from about a year ago, 1/5/21. So I've just got my 10 states per cases, and I've got cases and deaths, because Datawrapper, not only does it not care about all of my math and all of the other data, it doesn't want it. And it's going to make it a lot easier for me to make my graphic if I just have the data that I want. Okay, so Datawrapper, totally free, very easy to use. We just go into our dashboard, and what we're going to do is we're going to go create new chart. And it's a really simple process. It's going to walk us through a couple screens. If you've ever worked with making graphics, ever, the first place we start is always with our data, and that's generally going to be like tabular data that's in spreadsheet form. Datawrapper gives you lots of different ways to upload your data. With small data sets like this, I usually just copy and paste. So I'm just going to grab that little table there, including the headers. I'm going to copy it and just paste it right in here. And it looks pretty messy at first, but I'm going to click proceed, and Datawrapper is going to ingest the data, and it's going to show me it in tabular form, and I can just double check it and make sure it's right. I usually do just like a quick spot check to just make sure it pulled stuff in. This is looking pretty good, 99. Okay, so that looks good. So I'll just say proceed. And now it's just going to give me a bunch of different chart types. Let's start charting this data in different ways and see what it looks like. The default it's giving me here is the line chart, which line charts are really for time series data. So this isn't making much sense for me, but I can start clicking around and looking at different column charts. That's not making much sense. Different plots. Again, not making much sense. Could look at grouped bar charts. This might be okay. That's okay. It's the problem with a chart like this is it's really, as we'll see with a lot of the COVID data, is like the cases just so wildly outnumber the deaths that it just sort of dwarfs the deaths number. We could do a stacked bar where it's going to put the deaths after the cases, but a chart like this kind of implies parts of a whole, and cases and deaths don't really equal a whole. There's not like something that you add them together that it equals. So for this data, I kind of like the split bars, which is going to show cases on this side and deaths on this side. And yeah, let's just go ahead and go with that. So once we've chosen our chart type, we can go over to refine, and it's going to give us lots of options to just sort of make this look the way that we want. And you can do a lot here. I'm not going to go through every option, certainly, but there's lots you can do. I'd also suggest, for those of you that are more technically inclined or visually inclined, Flourish.studio is another program like this that gives you even more options, and you can really make things look exactly how you want. But let's just go through a couple and sort of clean this up a bit. So one thing, you always want to look at the format of your numbers. Like maybe we want to get rid of our decimals, or maybe we just want one decimal point. Why don't we just go with that? So we can align our labels right, so we have like a nice little line up against our bars. We can change the axes, which we don't need to do at this point. We can customize colors, which is nice. You know, Datawrapper gives you lots of sort of off the chart colors. I'm sorry, off the shelf colors that you can choose from. But you can also customize your colors. You can put in a hex code here. I think I'll, you know, the Pantone put out their color of the year 2022. It's this very Perry. Let's go ahead and use that just so we can put in this hex code, which is just like a letter and number combination that the internet likes to define colors. 7AB, there's our very Perry. So that turned it this purple and gave it a slightly lighter purple. We could also click customize colors and just choose exactly which color we wanted each bar to be. We won't go too nuts in that right now. Let's see what else we want to do here. Give it a color key, right? Like a legend, which isn't necessary really, because we've got these labels up here at the top. We could do some separating lines. We could make our bars thicker, right? Just sort of improve the visuals a little bit. We could change the sort order of the bars, though in this case, you know, cases are really our main thing. We could also reverse the order, but I think this is pretty much what I want to stick with here. So now let's talk a little bit about adding in a title, what Datawrapper calls a description, what I'm going to call chatter. It's what we generally call this descriptive text in journalism, sort of a jargony term. What we really want to do with the title and the description is we want to, there's two things that we want to do, right? We want to describe exactly what people are looking at, right? We don't want there to be any question about what this is showing. And we also want to help tell our story a little bit. So it's really helpful if we're not just like, here's some numbers, here's a graphic, figure it out yourself, right? This is an opportunity for us to like help people interpret the data and help tell our story a bit. So whether you do, which of those you do in the headline or the chatter is sort of, you could do either in either place. I think it's good to sort of write the title like a headline for a newspaper in some ways. In this particular case, I'm gonna use the headline to describe exactly what the chart is, right? US states with the most COVID-19 cases by population. There, nice and simple. For the chatter though, I'm gonna start to tell my story a little bit, right? I'm gonna help people interpret the data. So North Dakota and South Dakota lead the US in COVID-19 cases per 1,000 people as of January 5th, 2021. You know, it's really important that we keep throwing that data out over and over again, because even if this was today, if this was January 11th, 2022 data, well, tomorrow it's old and there's totally different numbers. So we just want to keep emphasizing over and over again exactly what we're showing to people. And then I talk about who leads the country in deaths, right? So here we're just sort of explaining what the data shows to help people interpret it. I'm going to add a note that says, again, this data is current as of January 5th. You can never, ever publish a news graphic that doesn't have a data source, because we're not making this stuff up ourselves, right? In this case, the data was collected from the New York Times. But like if I look at the Times data, they have a source on their data too. So I'm going to take their source as well. So I got it from the Times and they got it from state and local health departments and hospitals. And then I got the population data from the census. So I'm just going to be as sort of thorough as I can. I can add my byline. And then, you know, there's this is a new feature in Datawrapper, which is really great, alternative description for screen readers. So this is an accessibility option. If somebody who has vision impairments is looking at your graphic, you know, what's the screen, what's going to be read. And if we've done our job well with the headline and chatter, we can actually use our headline and chatter as our accessibility description. So we're gonna just use that. And yeah, let's go ahead and just say that that's our graphic, right? So we've made a lot of changes to this and made a nice little bar chart. Let's see how I'll do one time here. Okay, and so now we can publish this graphic and we can get a couple options, right? We get this nice link where we can just open it in a browser. Just, you know, there's not a lot to do with this. You can send it to your mom, you can email it to somebody, you can share it on Twitter. Generally for news purposes, this embed code is what we want. You can embed that directly in your news organization CMS or in a web page or whatever. You can also export like static versions of this if you just wanted it as an image to put in the newspaper or as a static version on your website. Okay, boy, time's going quick. Let's do another one really quick. Let's do a line chart. Let me see how quick I can get through this. So what I want to look at with the line chart is, okay, so we've got this data that looks at like cases per month over 2020. And basically what I did is just pulled like the cases and the deaths number on the last day of the month for each month. And so this is good data for a line chart. It's time series data. So let's just go ahead and paste this in, adjust it, check it. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so we'll go with the line chart. Lots of other options that might be interesting for this, but this is a nice simple line chart. I will say, like, I wouldn't publish this graphic as a line chart for the same reason that I mentioned before, that the deaths are just like dwarfed by the cases, and it doesn't give enough sort of importance to the fact that a lot of people are dying from COVID. So I would probably publish this as two separate line charts. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll just go ahead and take a look at this here. So, you know, this is a little dull, so we can do a lot to sort of improve this, I think. You know, we can change the date format at the bottom, though I actually think this date format is okay. We can change our number format if we wanted to. Oh, great, thank you, Anne. That's, yes, Dataviz catalog is quite lovely. What else do I want to do with this? Okay, so I think that the main thing I really want to do that I'd like to show inside here, give myself a little bit more room. I can make the cases bigger. You know, you can change the interpolation so that this is more like curved, but to do that, you'd really want to be sure that about the form of the data. So the linear just sort of connects the dots, and kind of a safer option, I think, especially for this data. But what I really want to do is I just want to try to make this look a little better. So we can fill the line between the areas. All right, customize symbols. This is what I want to do. Okay, so because we have data at a number of points, what I really want is I want to show a dot like at every single one of my labels. Because what this does is it lets your user know, hey, there's data at each of these points, and it's just a lot cleaner of a way to make your line chart. Certainly, it improves it visually, but more than that, it sort of encourages your user to check out the data at each point. Okay, so now let's add in a little headline and chatter here. And then I'm gonna pass it to you guys to do, to try this out, okay? So we're gonna, in this case, we're actually gonna tell our story a little bit in the headline. So I'm gonna say COVID-19 cases and deaths increased steadily in the United States throughout 2020, right? So that's like that's what we learned from this data. That's sort of our story. And then I'm gonna go on a little bit more in the chatter. At the end of February, the US reported 70 COVID cases and 1 death, and increased to over 6 million by the end of August. By the end of the year, over 20 million cases and 346,000 deaths. So again, we've got the same source as the last data. And alt text here. And I think that one's good to go too. All right, so what I'd like you to do, and we will take about, let's say we'll take 10 minutes with this, is I'd like you guys to take a look at the worksheet that we've been, that was shared before, and I'll share it again in the chat right now. And I'd like you to sign up for a Datawrapper account. I'd like you to try to make, we're gonna do number 1 right now. I'd like you to try to make a column chart. I've got the data for you here. There's 2 tabs in this worksheet. We're gonna work with this 10 states data. And I've got headline and chatter for you. And this is basically the exact same bar chart that we made just a minute ago. So I'll give you guys 10 minutes or however long it takes. If you guys get finished faster in some way, that's great. And I will be here the whole time to answer any questions.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to either ask them in the chat or just unmute.
So when we copy the data, we only want the data and not the source information in the header that's in your chart.
You do want the headers, but you don't want the source information. So just the table itself, including the headers.
And I just forgot which type of chart we're choosing from the choices, Adam.
Yeah, it was the, let's see here. Split bar chart, is that one of the options? I believe that's what they call it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't understand how this is free. How is
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so they have paid versions of it that are more sort of customized for publications and have greater, have different chart types and greater, more features and stuff like that. Like for instance, especially this is more so with Flourish, the other program, but they, like the Financial Times, for instance, uses Flourish for every single graphic that they make, and they pay like, I don't know, I think it's like $100,000 a year, and they have a completely customized suite just for the Financial Times, where it puts it out in all their fonts and their colors, and if they're trying to do a chart type that isn't in there, they'll make it for them and stuff like that. So they're giving you a taste with the free version, and then they try to upsell you into sort of a more professional version. There might be page view caps on the free version. No, actually, I don't believe that's true.
Can you explain the colorblind check and how much attention should we pay to that?
Sure. Yeah. So if you stick with the off-the-shelf colors in Datawrapper, sort of the ones that they suggest, you won't have any problem with colorblind. But it's always good to check out the colorblind check. I think that, like, I forget the number. It's some outrageous % of men in particular have color blindness between red and green. So it is an issue and something to keep in mind, definitely. And what you want to look for is sort of saturation issues. So if you want your bars to be if you want people to be able to distinguish that your bars in this case are two different colors, and you just want to look that when you look in the colorblind version, that those bars appear to be two different colors to somebody who's colorblind. And in simple charts like this, it probably isn't that big of a deal, but sometimes we'll be doing graphics where the visual, the data is encoded using color, and that really contributes to the understanding of the data. And in that case, you would want to be pretty careful about the color blind stuff.
It was on the other example, I think, the line charts where you mentioned you probably wouldn't do it as we did it, but that you would make two separate ones. Is there a way to do that and sort of have the same chatter and head and source, or would you literally just have to go in and do it twice?
You would have to go in and do it twice. And that's such a great, yeah, I really wish that, and that's called sort of, a lot of times we might refer to that as like small multiples, where you have like a couple charts next to each other under the same headline and chatter. It would be great if they had that functionality. What I'll usually do is I'll make a couple charts separately in Datawrapper, and then I'll write the headline and chatter like in the CMS, and then put the charts underneath it. So I'm sort of dumbing up what you're describing myself.
And Adam, if you wanted to, let's say, put an asterisk beside South Dakota because you wanted to, I mean, would that have to be in the spreadsheet, or can you edit those headers once it's in the table?
Yeah, like annotations to certain. Yep, absolutely, you can. I'll show that. I'll show that. Well, look, it's 11:29. So I'm actually gonna jump back in, and I know that people probably did not have enough time to finish, but I would usually give 15 minutes for this, but because we're short on time, I'll leave you guys to finish up later. So let me address that question. Okay, so share screen. Okay, should be back here. And so this is a sort of advanced version of a line chart. And one thing that I've done here is I have not put any sort of title or description on this at all. And what I did is I used something called an annotation to put the headline like in this big empty space just for visual purposes, because that's where I wanted it to go. So Datawrapper on most chart types has this thing called add text annotations, where you can just click it and you can add text wherever you want. And so that's how you would do that, Paul. And so, yeah, that's a really important part of data visualization, especially in journalism, because we really want to be able to point, I can't get rid of it. We really want to be able to point out certain things in our data and our chart and walk people through it and help tell our story. So yeah, that's a great question. You know, I wanted to show this really quick because this uses like some much more advanced stuff than we showed so far. And I just wanted to show that you can do more advanced graphics with Datawrapper. In this case, like I'm pulling thousands, tens of thousands of data points from a CSV that's hosted online from Johns Hopkins, and visualizing it. And this updates by itself every day, and it looks at COVID cases by day, new COVID cases by day, all across the world. And this looked a lot better before our current variant sort of shot everything up. But anyway, this just does some more interesting thing. This is called a area chart, stacked area chart, where you know, I've done a number of things. I used the annotations to put in the headline, but I also used color to sort of identify each country in the data by a different color. And then I used different sort of shades of that color to break them up by continent. And then I added text annotations to sort of to each, you know, to a bunch of different countries to help you identify it. So this is sort of a much more complex case study than what we've looked at so far, but I just wanted to show it to show that, you know, if you put some time into it, you can really do a lot with Datawrapper. All right, so let's do some maps real quick. So what I want to do first with maps is we'll do what's called a chloroplast map. And again, we'll look at counties in Maryland. And I've done the same thing we did with the states, right, where I took confirmed cases and confirmed deaths, and then I normalized those numbers per 1,000 people. And again, like this is really telling, because if you look at the cases and the deaths, you're going to see like PG County and Baltimore City and Baltimore County, the big counties have the most confirmed cases and deaths. But when you look at it per 1,000 people, it's actually like these, at least at this time, it was these really rural counties out in Western Maryland. And it really helped us identify like, hey, there's something going on here. So in this case, we're going to go create a new map. And we've got 3 different types of maps. Hopefully we'll get through 2 of them today. Locator maps are great, probably actually the most used type of map in news, but you guys can all figure this out yourself. It's so very, very easy. You like type in a location and it puts a dot there for you. And the chloroplast map is really just really common data visualization type, and it's so powerful here in Datawrapper. They have thousands of these shapes already put into the program. So if I start looking up Maryland, it's going to show me like this is, and they have this for probably every state you guys are from. This is incredible. Census tract, congressional districts, legislative districts, zip codes. You can do so much with this. It's fantastic. When I was in the newsroom, it would take like days to make a map like this, because you'd have to find the shapes, you'd have to ingest them into code, you'd have to write JavaScript to hook up your data. And we're going to do this in like 5 minutes. So this is Maryland, right? We've got our counties. So the only thing you really need to be careful of here is you have to make sure that you're inserting your counties, that your counties are arranged in the exact same format, like order that that theirs are, which if you have a case like Baltimore City and Baltimore County, it gets a little hinky sometimes. So I've truncated this data here. I've got the counties by cases, by deaths. I'm just going to copy this all in. And they have changed this a little bit recently, so hopefully this all works. So we'll paste it in here and click this button, and it ingested it. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, so let's go ahead and visualize it. Oh, I can't tell you how like this is amazing that we just did this in like 30 seconds. So we've got this beautiful map that it added colors for us. It added buckets. You can do a lot to change stuff here. And I am quickly going to add a few things, but if you play around, you can change colors. The one thing to keep in mind with a chloroplast map is like your higher numbers should be darker. That's something that we as humans like just are going to associate darker numbers with higher colors. I'm going to change a couple things really, really quick here just to make this look the way that I want. Whenever I make a map of Maryland, I want to fill up this blank space down here. So I'm going to change this to steps. I'm going to change it to tiles. I can change the min max if I wanted to, like and make this like 25 and 80. I want it to be a range if I can get it there. Color legend. Not okay, getting there. Okay, so if I go here, I want to make this on the bottom left. And I would like to stack, there we go, that's what I wanted. Okay, great. I can also give it a little caption. Great, wonderful. Other thing I want to do is make it ranges. Okay, so now we've got our legend where we want it to be, and when we hover over, we can see it's not quite perfect, right? It's giving us the county name, and it's giving us like some number that we don't totally know what it is. So we can get that in shape by customizing our tooltips a little bit. I think we do that over an annotation. So we can customize our tooltips. So you can see what this is doing is it's pulling in like columns from our data. So it's just showing like this is showing the county, and here it's showing like the cases per 1,000 people, which is good. That is what we want it to show, but it'd be good if we could clean that up a little bit. So we can type in plain text. I mean, this is the syntax that it uses to identify like a column, a dynamic column field. So it's using like the 2 brackets with the name of the column inside of it. So we can have it say like, okay, we can just write in plain text, cases per 1,000 people. And it's just going to add that at the end. And that's awesome that clean that up a lot. But I can also add like my other data too, which would be good if I added deaths. If I just click on that, it's going to add that dynamic column field in also. Deaths per 1,000 people. And that's good, but sometimes depending on your screen size, those two are going to run together. So I'm going to add in just a really basic HTML tag that's a break that's going to just break those 2 lines. And there, now we've got this awesome tooltip, and this looks great. I can't believe, I mean, literally this would take me like 3 or 4 days to do just a couple years ago. So we'll add in some quick headline and chatter to that, and that is our chloroplast map. So I'm just going to say COVID-19 cases in Maryland, counties by population. So I'm going to let people know I normalize that data. I'm actually going to do that twice. I'm going to do it in the description too. And again, I'm going to tell my story, right? Allegheny County has the most confirmed COVID-19 cases and deaths in Maryland by population. And that's like big news, man. This is like where everybody in Maryland lives, is here in Central Maryland. These are the mountains. Like, this should not have the most cases and deaths. And you can see that really it's, you know, Western Maryland was not doing good at this point. So it's important to point that out in the chatter. So I'm going to add my note. I'm going to add my source, which is the same source that we've used for all the data. That would add my alt text, and we'd be good to go on that one. Okay, so what I'd like to do is show you guys one more type of map real quick, and this is called a symbol map. What we're going to create is, it could also be called like a proportional dot map. We're basically going to put some dots in different points on a map, and then we're going to size them based on the data. So again, lots of shapes here for us to choose from. We're going to do a world map here, so I'll just click proceed. The data we're looking at here is top countries. So this is just from like the CNN data that this was and it came normalized. These are the countries that had the most cases and deaths per 100,000 people in a year ago. You can see we've got US among, like the so much smaller countries. Andorra was at the top at that time, which I'm not sure I really knew where that was. It's like in the Pyrenees Mountains near France. You guys probably know that. So this is a really easy map type to make. So what we do here, we don't have to really work with the spreadsheet at all. We just start like adding locations. So I'm going to say, okay, find Andorra. It's just going to add a dot there. Hopefully. Okay. And now I can sort of recreate my spreadsheet here and just start adding data. So I have cases per 100,000. And the only thing to keep in mind here is you have to keep clicking that yellow, or I'm sorry, that green checkbox. And this is not like the most user-friendly format, right? You kind of have to keep scrolling. But that's what I want. So I've got, and so here, the only thing I need to be careful of is that I'm not inserting numbers with commas, because Datawrapper is a Dutch country and they treat commas differently in Europe. Okay, and I want to click check. Okay, there. So now it's added. Now I've got one country in there, and yeah, exactly. Okay, now let's go ahead and just add like our small. Actually, I want to add like two more, just really quick. Okay, Montenegro, 12. If I just get 3 of them on here, it'll give us enough to play with. And I can show you guys the finalized map. So I'm going to just add our 10th one as well. I've had 100. Okay, so now we've got 3 dots, and it will be easy enough to add all 10 of them there. And what I want to do in Visualize is, so this is giving me a couple ways to encode this data. We can do it by size, which I do want to do. And it's saying which column do you want to use to encode the size. And I want to use cases. So what this is going to do is make the dots bigger or smaller depending on the number of cases. And I can change the max symbol size depending on what I want it to do. So what we're seeing here is like Andorra's dot is slightly bigger than Montenegro, and they're both bigger than Panama, right? So that gives people an idea of the data visually just by looking at it. You could also encode a different field by color, which is kind of cool. So we could do deaths by color. We're not going to do that in this case because all the deaths were right around 100 in this data. So I don't think there's a real reason to do that. And in this case, I make this map zoomable because we want people to be able to zoom into it. And there's some other things that we could change. I will just show you guys what this map looks like in the end. So this is sort of the finalized, right? Countries with the most COVID-19 cases by population. And then I point out that Andorra is, has the, the most cases. And also the fact that like the US is in this list at all, I think is worth noting. So the second exercise I'd like you guys to do is to go ahead and just try to recreate that symbol map. I've got the data that you'll need in the second spreadsheet of countries. Yes, yeah.
Adam, has been fantastic. We are starting to get questions in the chat, and I wonder if we might move to Q&A.
I'd be happy to. Yeah, and you guys could just do this exercise later. That's a great idea.
Okay, great.
Gabrielle must be our expert, right? I heard there was one of you out there.
Dana, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So when you were entering those figures manually, are you able to enter, data in bulk, just copy and paste everything when you were doing that symbol map?
You're not. No, not that I know of. That one you kind of have to do manually, which is gonna limit how many dots you put on there, right?
Nisa, go ahead.
Hi, we use Datawrapper in my newsroom too, and I was wondering, I always been like, should we be like filling in the screen reader description, like, and like, how should I guess we be doing that if we should be?
Yeah, I think, that's a huge conversation in the DataViz community right now about accessibility. And traditionally, it's something that we do really poorly, I think. And I think it's important. Yeah, I think people are coming around to this idea of it being very important. And if if you've worked in sort of in web production for, we've been doing, accessibility has been a conversation in web production for 30 years, 25 years. And I think DataViz is just sort of coming around to it. And, you can see like this is a really visual medium, but we have to consider people with impairment. So, I would approach it as I personally think, and this is, again, like there's not a lot of guidance out there. I personally think that if you're writing your headline and your chatter in the right way, if you're describing exactly what the chart shows and helping to tell the story, that will sort of suffice for the screen reader. But I'm not I wouldn't say I'm an expert on that.
Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, you talked a lot about rates, per 1,000, per 100,000. I work in Columbus, Georgia. For those of you that aren't familiar with Georgia, we have 159 counties, which is second most in the country to Texas. And some of these counties are very, very small, like 1,000, 2,000 people. So a lot of the conversations we had around making COVID-19 visualizations was, how do we accurately share this without blowing these small rural counties out of proportion? How do you handle that?
Well, I think normalizing the data is how you do it, right? You look at per however many people. And if there's only a couple thousand people in a county, then you do it per 100 people, I think. But that's exactly sort of I think that normalizing the data, looking at it per X number of people is how we address that issue. So we're not sort of assigning. I mean, does that answer the question, or is there a problem of not identifying with normalizing it?
Yeah, it's just more like, there's a county south of us about, 1,000 people, and they have like 20, this is an example, like 26, 27 COVID cases in a week, and they're the biggest red dot on the map. I mean, is that really indicative of the problem they're dealing with, or?
I mean, I think it is. I mean, I think what that indicates is that by percentage, they have more COVID cases than any other county, and that seems to be a problem, right? I mean, whether you're looking at, if you're looking at it by percent, that seems to be a more accurate way to deal with the data. If you're looking, if 25% of the people in that county have COVID, that seems to be something to address, whether they only have 100 people or whether they have 100,000 people.
Right. Yeah, we had a lot of conversations about it, and I wanted to ask because.
But I think there's also, but I mean, you make an interesting point that like, right. I mean, I do see your point, and I think that, you could think about other ways to split it up. Or they're like, zip code is traditionally like a terrible way to look at anything, but because zip codes aren't super meaningful. But you could look at other ways to slice and dice the data that might make more sense, like regions of the state, for instance, or something like that.
Thank you for your presentation, Adam. But I wanted to ask, is there a way to sort of visualize the sort of drastic population differences sometimes? Georgia is a good example, but I was also thinking about in your continent example, just because, Asia is really massive and Africa is really massive. And, looking at that comparison with Europe and maybe also like South America and even North America, it can be sort of difficult to get a sense of like the difference between population visually.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to try to give a good answer to this one, because I noticed that the associate dean at the college just jumped on the call. So I think there's a couple ways to handle it. One is you could calculate change in population and do it on a single chloroplast map, like we did with the Maryland counties. So that you could show a color that shows like, okay, this is the percent of population change, negative or positive, on one map, and then that would show it. Another way is you could have two chloroplast maps side by side, one showing population in 2010 and the other one showing population in 2020, and let people sort of visually look at the difference. There's another type of graph that wouldn't be a map that it's called like, what do they call it in Datawrapper? I think it's called like an arrow plot that basically shows two values for a specific, variable, and you could show, the sort of charted out the number for 2010 and the number for 2020, and then sort of a line, or you can do an arrow that sort of connects them to show whether it's gone up or whether it's gone down. I think those are probably the three ways I would play around with in that situation.
Go ahead, David.
Can you do map overlays, maybe like showing areas that had been redlined in the past and comparing and showing how today per capita income is still being hit by that, something like that?
So you mean when you say an overlay, like you would show like satellite data or something like that of an area, or a map, like more like a Google map style type thing?
Showing comparisons to an area that broken down by income, and then simultaneously showing COVID rates or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're going to be hemmed in by is like the shapes that are defined in Datawrapper. So how are you going to do that? Are you going to do that by county? Are you going to do that by zip code? You need to think about like, okay, I'm going to show this specific area. I mean, if you're trying to show redlining, for instance, for a lot of places, there are maps out there that have redline that, like for Baltimore City where I live, redlining was like a huge issue. So there's plenty of maps out there that show what neighborhoods were redlined. So maybe that's an area, maybe you want to start with that redlined map, and then you could use that shape to sort of show COVID rates. I mean, I think the problem that you're talking about is less of a visualization problem and more of like a data problem, that you need to define an area and say, okay, I'm going to show rates in this area, and then you have to like get the data for that area. So for redlining, maybe you're going to show redlining by, like in Baltimore City, we talked a lot about neighborhoods, right? So we could say like, okay, here's the 125 neighborhoods in Baltimore City, here's how they were redlined, and then next to it, here's a map that shows COVID rates in those same neighborhoods or something like that. I mean, I think once we get into like mapping, there are, I think that the sort of ideas that you're throwing out there are going to be better handled by like the graphics team at your publication than Datawrapper is going to be like in most cases, for sort of quick and dirty off the shelf maps. Like when we get into doing more custom work like that, we're going to use like cartography programs like QGIS, or you can even grab screenshots off something like Google Earth and pull them into Adobe Illustrator and just start annotating them and things like that.
Let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Maybe we can, since the dean is already on, and we can move forward. But thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful. And I'm sure that a lot of the fellows will be rewatching your video. It was great. Thank you so much.
Sure. And I just wanted to mention at the bottom of the exercise that I shared with you guys, I have a video that I've done that's like a much longer version of this. It's more like an hour and a half, and it's on YouTube, and that is always available to you, and I'm happy to answer questions anytime. So thank you guys so much.